in the region and beyond. My name is Jörg Husar. I'm the Latin America Program Manager at the IEA, and I will briefly mention a couple of housekeeping points before we move to the opening remarks. Firstly, we would like to ask speakers to stay muted and with their cameras switched off, please, until the moderators tell them otherwise. Secondly, we are glad to have simultaneous interpretation for English and Spanish at this event. For attendees on Zoom, you can select the language channel in the application, and for guests on YouTube, you will have to enter the respective language live stream for this event. One important request to speakers is who use the interpretation feature of Zoom, please switch interpretation on off once you're about to start your own intervention. Otherwise, this cannot be translated to other participants. And finally, speakers, very important notice to please stick to the time allotted to you for the intervention. We have 5 minutes for our 2 main speakers in each session, 3 minutes to other Latin American ministries and authorities in the same session, and 2 minutes for participants from IEA member countries. To help you keep track of time, we will display a timer on the screen. And with this, I have the honor of introducing our 2 co-hosts of today's roundtable, who will now provide their opening remarks. Dr. Fatih Birol, Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, and Alfonso Blanco, Executive Secretary of the Latin American Energy Organization, OLADE. Dr. Birol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Husar. Greetings to everybody from Paris, from IEA headquarters, Honorable Prime Minister, Minister Mark Phillips. We are so delighted to have you with us, Mr. Prime Minister, and we are also very delighted to have so many ministers and high-level authorities from across Latin America. And we are grateful that all of you have accepted our invitation of OLADE, my dear colleague, Executive Secretary Alfonso Blanco, and myself. OLADE, if I may say so, our sister organization in Latin America, and the IEA work on many fronts together in a perfect way. I would also like to thank the IDB, the new IDB President, Claver Caron. He just started his job and he was ready to jump in, but as a result of a last-minute issue, he will be joining us through a video. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when we look at all the ministers, Mr. Prime Minister, ministers, and all the high-level authorities in the region, we see that the 70% of the Latin America energy demand is around this virtual table today, a very representative group. And we all know that the region, like the rest of the world, is heavily affected by coronavirus. Our numbers show that the global GDP this year will decline about 5%, never seen in the history, and it, as such, poverty around the world will increase. One major issue, I think, it is sometimes get lost in the news when we discuss the economic downturn, is the unemployment. And again, our data shows that as of today, over 300 million people have lost their jobs around the world since the COVID has started. Think about this 300 million people and their families. It's a major, major issue. Of course, our job is energy. And when I look at the energy world, which we do every day in the IEA, the global energy scene, it is the impact of COVID on the energy world is historic. And I believe when the economy rebounds, hopefully sometime soon, the global economy, energy demand will rebound, but the impact of this COVID on the energy sector will be with us for years, if not decades to come. Now, we are seeing that many governments in Latin America are putting one after another economic recovery plans to give a boost to the economy, to find jobs for their people, like the other countries around the world. So what we have done as the International Energy Agency, we have developed a sustainable recovery plan for all the countries around the world, and to suggest them what kind of energy policies they can introduce their economic recovery plans so that their economy rebounds, they create jobs, and at the same time, they have a clean and resilient energy systems. When it comes to Latin America, our analysis show that there are 4 areas we think of critical importance in terms of the Latin American energy sector in the times of COVID. Number 1, building sector. Latin America faces challenges in terms of housing for vulnerable groups and constructs a lot of social housing. And here, there is a huge opportunity to make the energy efficiency part of those efforts. And our study shows that the energy efficiency, insulation of the homes, windows, ceilings, it provides a lot of additional jobs. In my view, energy efficiency is a job-creating machine. It creates jobs and jobs and jobs. This is the first thing I would like to highlight in terms of Latin America and in terms of the fight against COVID from an energy sector point of view. Second is biofuels. With its huge agricultural base and technological leadership, Latin America is leading the decarbonization of the transport with more production and use of biofuels. Also, biofuels creates a lot of jobs, biofuel sector, and many countries in Latin America, and we have a great example of Brazil and the others, can create even more jobs through biofuels sector and increasing efforts there. Third, solar and hydropower. When I say solar, when I look at the numbers, there is a huge potential for solar, and solar also creates a lot of jobs. And one data, in my view, a heartbreaking data, is the following. I asked my colleagues this morning, what is the total solar electricity capacity in entire Latin America, from Mexico to all the countries? It is about 15 gigawatts. And it is equal to the solar capacity of United Kingdom. So think about the United Kingdom in the map and entire Latin America, the size, and at the same time, the radiation of solar. I don't know how many of you have been in London recently, but you may all know from your experiences that we don't need to look at the data statistics. Definitely Latin America has much more solar, but still the UK and the Latin America total solar capacity is equal to each other. There's a huge opportunity there. And hydropower, again, maintaining the hydropower potential and building upon that is extremely important in our view. This is the third area. And fourth and the last point is a technology that IEA is taking as a priority for Latin America and for the world in terms of innovation, which is hydrogen. And across the region, there are several countries developing hydrogen strategies. And as it is a top priority for the IEA, we have helped many countries to develop and now implement their hydrogen strategies. I think this is a fourth point, which the opportunity in Latin America, in my view, are huge. efficiency in the buildings, biofuels, solar, hydro, and hydrogen. Of course, these are some points that I would like to highlight in terms of sustainable recoveries. But we shouldn't forget that many countries in the region have a significant resource base for oil and natural gas. And many countries in the region use oil and gas revenues as an additional boost for their economies. And we all know that the COVID also hit the hydrocarbon sector severely in the region. But we believe oil and natural gas, they can all play a very important role. One word on oil. Some people like oil, some people don't like oil, but we all use these masks, which is a product of petrochemical industry. We all use hand sanitizers, which is a product of petrochemical industry. So we have to be pragmatic, realistic, what we are talking about. And in terms of natural gas, we think that the natural gas has an important role also in the region to play as an affordable fuel for industry sector, especially when you need high temperature heat for the different parts of industrial sector, and also to support the increasing share of solar and wind as a dispatchable power generation source. So we think all fuels and all technologies, which are all in the countries in Latin America, needs to take a place in the sustainable recovery plans. But the 4 points I mentioned in the beginning, in our view, takes the priority. So as International Energy Agency, we are delighted to work with so many Latin American countries to support them, but we are especially delighted to work very closely with the OLADE, and it is very able leader, my colleague Alfonso. And here I would like to suggest Alfonso to give his opening welcome remarks. Alfonso, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. It's a pleasure to be here. We decided to make the opening remarks in Spanish, and I will switch to Spanish. Excuse me. Well, señores ministros,
ministers, vice ministers, prime minister, all representatives of Latin America and the Caribbean, and members of OLADE, representatives of the IEA, Dr. Fatih de Birol, representatives of the Inter-American Development Bank, Mr. Javier Cepes, authorities from Latin America and Caribbean. For me, it is a source of great pleasure to be able to launch this initiative, this roundtable. Around a month ago, I was speaking with Dr. Birol, who proposed setting up this regional event so that we could look at the impact of the pandemic on our region. Indeed, there had also been meetings with other regions of the world, and the decision was taken to repeat this with Latin American. This was also the fruit of reflections that have been carried out, that are really the fruit themselves of work that has been carried out over the last 3 years. And indeed, we have made a lot of progress in terms of, for example, standardization and methodology when it comes to creating statistics related to the energy sectors in Latin America. Indeed, we also are pleased to be able to be involved as strategic partners for issues linked to energy. Indeed, we are now, as has already been stated, looking at rolling out an action plan, a strategic action plan to help our regions face up to this issue. We have seen a major drop in the energy sector a drop of between 2 and 15% in energy demands. We are living in one of the most unequal regions of the world. This crisis will have long-lasting and far-reaching impacts on our communities and will drive some of our populations into extreme poverty. We also have a very difficult budgetary situation, which is affecting the whole region. The development plans in the energy sector have also been affected, of course. We're seeing a rise in debt in many of our countries, which is affecting the projects that we want to roll out in our region, causing major delays. Also, the oil prices that have seen a major drop across the world will have an impact on our region in particular, especially for OPEC countries. So all of this leads us to have to think about what kind of strategies we need to put in place that can be valuable to us so that we can recover the levels of activity and employment and social protection that we so desperately need in our region. I am convinced that this crisis, of course, has negative aspects, but can also be an opportunity for our region. If we can face up to those challenges in a coordinated, structured way, in a way that our region has already been able to demonstrate at certain points in the past. We have 97% electricity coverage in our region. However, we are not fulfilling our full potential across the whole region in this particular area. Therefore, we need to make sure that we have policies that can continue to push sustainable development across our region, especially in the energy sector. We can channel investment into our economies through this sector. This will allow this sector to really take off and to tap into its full potential, creating jobs, and also through innovation and research, we will be able to have an added value for all citizens of our countries. What do we need to be able to achieve this? First and foremost, we need to make sure that we have a dialogue that is based around sustainable development. We need to make sure that there are the policies targeting different sectors that are going in this same direction. We also will need public policies to support markets, policies that are focused on supporting and promoting recovery. And all stakeholders need to be involved. The industrial sector also needs to be involved, so that we can reach these objectives. I am convinced that we will be able to fulfill our potential working hand in hand with international and regional organizations. And that way, through using all of these synergies, we will be able to solve this puzzle. Through dialogue, we'll be able to have coordinated actions aimed at sustainable recovery so that we can meet the needs of our region. So I encourage you to engage in this rich and deep, far-reaching debate so that we can fully improve the situation of the citizens of our region. Thank you to all of you for participating in this round table, and warm greetings to all of those who are following us from a distance. It's important to create these fora for discussion that are open and via virtual platforms so that as many people as possible can be involved. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank Mauricio J. Carone, President of the Inter-American Development Bank, who is going to, who sent us a video with his remarks, and that's what we're going to listen to next. Thank you very much.
Buenos días. Y muchísimas gracias por la
Hello,
invitación.
and thank you very
Las
much for the
economías de nuestros
invitation.
países han sido
The economies of
terriblemente
our
golpeadas
countries
por la
have
pandemia
been
y la mayoría de los gobiernos
deeply
están creando
impacted
paquetes
by
de
the
estímulos
pandemic,
fiscales
and
para
many
reactivarlas.
countries are
Esto nos da una
taking
gran
actions and
oportunidad para
putting in
invertir en una
place
economía tecnológicamente avanzada,
stimulus
digitalizada y
plans.
responsable hacia el ambiente.
We need to make sure that
Estas
the
decisiones
future is one that is
determinan el camino
sustainable and that
no
respects the
solamente para la
environment.
recuperación, sino también para la
This is
competitividad
not
de la
only
región y
important
de nuestro
for
futuro
our
climático.
economies, but also
Podemos
for our fight
transformar esta
against
crisis en una
climate change.
oportunidad para la
We
modernización
need to
energética de
see
América
this
Latina y el
crisis as
Caribe
an
y para
opportunity
lograr el
for
acceso
Latin
universal
America
a la
and the
electricidad.
Caribbean.
El consumo de electricidad per cápita de América Latina y el
Indeed, we
Caribe
see that
es
per
aproximadamente
capita energy
2/3 del
consumption
promedio mundial
in
y
Latin
solo
America
una
and the Caribbean
sexta
is
parte
only at
del consumo de
2/3 of the
electricidad
global
per
average
cápita
and
de
only
América
a
del Norte.
sixth of the
Esto se debe a
capacity
una
of
combinación del
North
nivel de
America.
ingresos de
This
nuestros
is
países,
linked to
la
the level of
composición de
income
la matriz
in our
energética
country,
y del precio de
the
los servicios.
energy mix that
Para
exists, and the
aumentar el consumo
prices
de
that
electricidad,
exist.
tenemos que trabajar en varios
When it comes
frentes.
to
Tenemos que reducir costos,
power
algo que el
generation,
Banco
we have to work on
está haciendo
several
ahora hacia eficiencia
in several
energética
areas.
y en la
For
reducción de
example,
las
driving
pérdidas
down
eléctricas en las empresas
costs
públicas de varios países.
and making sure
Tenemos
that
que aumentar la
the
apertura. Si bien la
public
mayoría de los
companies
países han logrado
function
tasas de
better in many of
acceso a
our
la
countries.
electricidad superiores al 90%, países como Haití y
There
Honduras
are,
tienen tasas
although there are some
entre
countries
el
that have a
99 y el
90%
81%. Bajo
coverage in
América
terms of
crece una
energy access, there
iniciativa
are
que
also
lideré en el
countries
gobierno de
like
Estados Unidos.
Haiti and
Busqué
Honduras
impulsar inversiones del
where that
sector
coverage is
privado
only
en
between
energía
29
y
and
establecer
81%. So we have
condiciones de
to make
mercado
sure that
para que
we are
faciliten su
channeling
participación.
investment into the
Esto es
right
clave para fomentar la
areas.
recuperación
That's
económica,
absolutely
cerrar las brechas
key
de cobertura
so
y
that
diversificar
we
la matriz
can
energética de
close
la región.
these
Las
gaps that
fuentes de energía
exist.
renovable no convencional son una de las
The
alternativas
non-conventional
más
renewable
prometedoras para
energy
diversificar la matriz en
sector
América
is one
Latina
of
y
the
Caribe.
most promising
Pero
that
lamentablemente,
exists in
la
our
pandemia ha
region.
provocado
The
interrupciones en la cadena de
pandemic
suministro de
has
equipos
no
para la
doubt led
industria de
to
las energías renovables.
delays in the
Muchos
rolling out of
desarrolladores de
certain
energía
projects linked
eólica
to
y solar han
renewable
tenido que
energy.
retrasar la
Lots
construcción
of
de
wind
proyectos.
energy and solar
Llegó el
energy
momento de
companies have
fomentar el
had
inversor
to
en estas
halt their
cadenas del
activities
hemisferio,
or
algo que
slow them down.
generará inversión y nuevos
So we have
empleos,
to make
además
sure
de
that we can
fortalecer nuestra matriz energética.
generate investment
Por
which
eso es
can lead to
importante atraer empresas a la
employment.
región que puedan convertirse en
There
proveedoras de
are
energía renovable para
business
todas las zonas.
leaders and companies in the region that
En
can
promedio,
really
las
be
inversiones en
leaders
energías
and be at the
renovables y
forefront
eficiencia energética
of
generan casi
this
3 veces más empleos
revolution.
permanentes que las inversiones
Indeed,
en
the
combustibles fósiles.
renewable energy sector can create 3
También
times more
debemos
permanent
aprovechar
jobs
las nuevas
than the oil and gas
tecnologías,
sector.
como las baterías de litio y las
We
plantas
also can take
hidroeléctricas
advantage of new types
reversibles
of
que
technology,
permiten
lithium
almacenar energía
batteries,
renovable. De la misma manera, la
and other
digitalización de
types
nuestros
of new
sistemas
technologies.
energéticos puede aumentar la productividad, la seguridad y la
And all of this will
accesibilidad
help
de
us
los
to
servicios.
improve
Nuestra región
productivity,
también cuenta con enormes recursos de
supply,
gas natural
and
que pueden
security of our
complementar a las
energy
energías renovables para
energy
resolver
options.
el problema de
So,
intermitencia.
renewable
Se estima que nuestro
energy
continente
sources
tiene
are
reservas de
important.
gas
We also
natural
need to
superiores
deal
a
with the intermittent nature
290
of
trillones
some
de
of
pies
them.
cúbicos.
When it comes to
Si
natural
bien el
gas,
acceso a la
our
infraestructura
region
energética
has
es
the
fundamental,
potential, has a
el uso de estos servicios
290
depende de la
trillion
capacidad
cubic
de los
feet
hogares a
potential
pagar la
when it comes to
energía,
natural
a
gas.
comprar electrodomésticos y
But of
disfrutar
course, we
las
can only
ventajas
tap
de la
into this if people
conectividad.
have money
Para
to
asegurar
pay
la
for
oferta de estos
energy,
servicios a
and if they
precios
are buying
razonables,
household
es
appliances and
urgente
using
promover
energy
asociaciones
and
públicas privadas que faciliten la
fulfilling their own
inversión
potentials
y
in
la
terms of
competencia.
using this energy.
El BID seguirá facilitando las
Through
reformas necesarias para reducir las
investment, we will
barreras
also be able to
políticas,
be more
legales,
competitive.
regulatorias e institucionales y de mercado
We
que
need to make
limitan
sure
el
we can
flujo del
count
capital
on
privado. Esta mesa redonda
institutions
ministerial es una
and
gran oportunidad para
associations
discutir
that can
cómo en estos
support
momentos tan
market
difíciles los
actors.
países pueden aprovechar las
These
inversiones
are very,
para
very difficult
reactivar sus
moments
economías,
for our
generar empleos
countries,
y trabajar con el sector
but
privado
we
para
need
la
to make sure that we
transición
can continue
energética
from the
inclusiva. Les deseo una
public
discusión
sphere,
productiva y
working
les
with the
agradezco
private
una vez más
sector,
por la invitación.
pushing
Muchísimas
our
gracias.
work forward. Thank you very much once again for this invitation, and enjoy your debates. Thank you.
So we thank the IDB president for his statement here. And as such, we are starting the first session focusing on the electricity sector, the power sector. And we are going to hear from two main speakers. First of all, the Minister of Mines and Energy of Colombia, followed by the Secretary of Energy of Panama. And I would like to ask them to turn on their cameras and joining us. Now, first, perhaps I can start with our first speaker, Mr. Diego Meza Pio, Minister of Mines and Energy in Colombia. Diego, looking forward to hear you, sir. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. I extend, welcome to everyone here, Mr. Blanco, President Rene, and fellow ministers and secretaries. It's a pleasure to be here talking about how we can turn crises into opportunities. And crises usually bring opportunities, and I think COVID-19 is no different. But it is up to policy and decision makers to identify and act upon these opportunities in order to be able to come out stronger and better off. The COVID-19 outbreak came at a time in the region, and in particularly in Colombia, when we were experiencing unprecedented progress in our energy transition goals. In this sense, our main objective is to maintain that momentum of the past few months, particularly in incorporating variable renewables into our power matrix, while adopting new technologies, generating new jobs, and attracting new participants into our power market. Fortunately, before the pandemic, we developed and implemented several policies to make investment in variable renewables and energy efficiency much more attractive. For example, we've increased from 5 to 15 years the time for which the 15% uplift is available, leveling the field between established players and new entrants into the Colombian market. We also made VAT exemptions on solar panels and other equipment automatic, eliminating red tape and democratizing these tax incentives for the whole population. We've also established a compulsory quota of variable renewables for electricity distribution companies, in which 10% of the energy that they deliver to final consumers has to come from these sources by 2022. And finally, we developed a competitive auction for variable renewables, in which we included several policy innovations, such as the first ever variable renewable double auction, in which both buyers and sellers bid quantities and prices. This was complemented with other policies that were directed towards capital-intensive industries, such as reducing the corporate income tax rate from 33 to 30%, making all VAT payments on the acquisition of capital goods 100% creditable against corporate income tax. And the result of all these policies has been very positive for Colombia. As I said, we ran 2 auctions in 2019, and we awarded more than 2,500 megawatts of installed capacity of variable renewables to be built over the next 3 years, taking the participation of these resources into our power matrix from less than 1% to 12% by 2022. 2 other points that are worth mentioning here are that we were able to achieve record low prices on electricity with the auctions, as well as to welcome new players into our market for the first time. Our goal now in the post-COVID-19 and thinking about how to jumpstart the economy is to accelerate these developments. We will require also investments in transmission lines, along with promoting the growth of distributed energy resources, particularly using solar photovoltaics. Specifically, in Colombia, we have prioritized now 33 projects, including power generation, transmission lines, but also thermal generation, which are going to be built over the next 3 years. These projects are worth over $9 billion in investments and will generate more than 54,000 direct jobs. We're also working on several innovation fronts as part of this economic recovery package, and we're developing a roadmap to introduce cutting-edge technologies such as green hydrogen and geothermal resources. Another point that I would like to mention here is that we're launching the first auction for large storage battery systems in Colombia, and I believe in the region, which will help us leverage these technologies as well. We also have significant work on sustainable mobility, both on electric vehicles. We led the region in sales of electric vehicles in 2019, and this will continue to expand going forward. Finally, on integration and cooperation with other countries and multilateral organizations, I would like to mention and invite our dear colleagues here to join our RELAC initiative, which expects to bring renewable energy installed capacity in Latin America to 70% by 2030. We've been leading this with Chile and Costa Rica. We have 10 countries, but we believe that with the help of IDB, OLADE, IRENA, and IEA, we can foster and continue to increase this in the region. And finally, I just want to mention that we also have interconnection with Ecuador that is helping both countries to mitigate potential risks of energy security going forward. So let's stop at that because I think it's time's up, but I thank you again for the opportunity to participate in this session.
Congratulations for all of them. And now, one of the points you mentioned, the renewable actions, the auctions, the two-way auctions. This is really, you mentioned the results at home, very impressive, but I can assure you that it attracted a lot of international attention as well, as it's a very creative way to go. And this is obvious that the share of variable renewables will increase in Colombia. Do you see, as in other countries, do you see there is a challenge coming from the grids? There is a job to strengthen the grids, to invest in the grids, transmission lines, in order to secure the electricity there. Do you see such a challenge also in Colombia?
Yes, we do. And we have two main lines that go towards the northern part of the country, because most of our potential, especially on wind and solar, is located on the Caribbean region, and there's no grids there. So two of those projects that I mentioned, two of the 33, is the building of these transmission lines to be able to bring power from wind and solar from the northern part of the country into the interior. Those are going forward. A significant investment is being done by one of the leading companies in Colombia. But yes, that's one of the bottlenecks that we identified when we launched the auctions.
Thank you very much, Diego, and all the best for the next steps. Now, may I turn to Dr. Jorge Rivera's staff, who is the Secretary of Energy of Panama, to hear from the Panama's perspectives and experience. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Dr. Fatih Birol in the IEA and OLADE for organizing this major high-level event today that we are going to take the opportunity of to share some of our experiences with you and talk about how we're trying to recover from COVID. I'd like to congratulate the new president of the IDB. Let me start by saying something about what we're doing. And just like most of Latin American countries, we have a power generation mix, which includes a large share of renewables, about 60–70%. We have a high percentage of wind and solar, something like 20–23% of natural gas, using the latest technologies. And we've been developing these new technologies over the last 2 or 3 years. But of course, we need to work more on the demand side. We have a lot to do in terms of energy efficiency and providing universal access. But we also have to take into account the fact that there's an energy transition that we are planning for our country. And we're not just talking about the power sector, but the energy sector, including transport and the impact of GHGs, of course, because so much GHG emission comes from transport. So that is a major factor in achieving our energy transition. So we have developed a national strategy for electric power. So we are looking at power generation, but not neglecting transport, whether it be private or public. And this also includes networks such as our public metro. But in general, these are major challenges, as we've seen, but pinning them all together is the environmental change and the fight against the climate change. There's also a technological revolution. We need to think about batteries, other storage devices for solar energy. So these are several drivers that we are looking at the same time. And what we've done is set up a dialogue process last year. And in March of this year, we already came forward with an energy transition energy that will enable us to implement this strategy. And we're trying to see how we can adapt our grid system, which wasn't designed for these conditions. And of course, we also need to involve the consumers in this process. Artificial intelligence will play a major role as well. And so we're trying to take advantage of the pandemic as an opportunity to work out a system whereby we can develop a policy for the next 10 years in line with our sustainable development goals, along with a stimulus package, economic stimulus package that the government is planning so that we can adapt our energy transition to these various measures. And by 2024, we hope to be able to invest sustainably, something like 16 million new jobs. That should lead to savings as well. We're talking about $160 million in the public budget, and we are also focusing on productivity, not neglecting, of course, the question of air pollution, but we have a range of different targets, and we're hoping to take these forward on a regional basis. And one of the main things we're looking at is the development of hydrogen. And we want to approach this on a regional level. Hydrogen for us is very important. It's an area of technology that requires future investment. So perhaps under the guidance of the IEA, we will be able to take this forward. And Panama is always more than willing to work for regional cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very impressive tour de horizon, Mr. Secretary, what you are doing. And first of all, on hydrogen, we are working with many governments around the world, and we are happy to share the best practices whenever you want. If I may, Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the huge solar and wind potential, and you are already making a lot of use of that. But if you were to single out one challenge to make more use of the solar and wind, what would you tell us? What do you see is the single most important challenge to make more use of solar and wind potential you have, Mr. Secretary?
Very good question, because I would say there's not just one, there are two challenges. There's the question of intermittence of sources. That is one of the main challenges. So we are developing natural gas as a fixed constant power supply. And we have two major natural gas projects in our country. But intermittence, of course, that's a major part of our strategy. It's very important that we have a flexible system whereby you can operate the system without sacrificing flexibility, but we definitely want to get more renewables in the system. Those are what we see as the challenges.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Yes, when we talk about the solar and wind, the magic word comes here is the flexibility. How we create flexibility in the systems in order to secure that electricity is always with us. Now, may I, after hearing the Colombia and Panama, may I invite Brazil, Costa Rica, IEA, and SIA to join us by activating the cameras. And now I have the distinct pleasure to invite my esteemed friend, the Minister of Brazil. He is with us. Mr. Minister, very nice to see you again. And the floor is yours, Minister Bento. We are looking forward to hear you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us once again.
Thank you, my friend Fatih. Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here in this roundtable involving OLADE and the IEA. I should actually be speaking in the next roundtable, but I could not give up this opportunity to say something about Brazil's power sector in the context of the pandemic. We cancelled the generation auctions scheduled for this year. We just had one transmission auction planned, and that will take place in December of this year. It is a vital operation for our portfolio. The only one of the year which is connected with the expansion of the sector. Before the end of the year, we will be presenting, as we usually do, a plan for auctions in the fields of generation and transmission for the next 3 years. Preliminary studies show that Brazil will need new energy as of 2025. So I would like to express all my thanks to OLADE. With the Energy Information System, SIE Brazil, and technical studies, we're able to exchange statistics and best practice lessons so as to drive forward the energy system in Brazil along with its neighbors. So during the pandemic, we were able to work in a coordinated and integrated manner. We've been importing LPG from Argentina and natural gas from Bolivia, and we exchange electrical energy with Uruguay and Argentina. We believe that exiting this crisis, we will reinforce the integration and cooperation in the field of regional energy. And I would also like to express my thanks to the IEA. There is no modernization without innovation. Brazil relies on the agency to take forward the process of modernization in market design and for improving the governance of R&D, innovation in clean energies and energy efficiency. All of this within the framework of the Clean Energy Transitions Program. Thank you all very much for your cooperation. That is good for Brazil and therefore indirectly for the whole region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Mr. Minister, I know very well your great efforts to create more efficient markets in Brazil, and I'm sure that the more efficient markets will help to attract more investments, and it will contribute to the recovery in your country. Thank you very much for your great efforts, Mr. Minister. And you can speak in this session, in all the sessions, because I know that you know all the energy sector by heart. But thank you very much for joining this power session, Mr. Minister. Very much appreciated. Another important country in the region is Chile. Unfortunately, Minister Jobe is traveling in the country in Chile. So he sent us a short video about the Chile experience, and we are going to listen Minister Jobe now.
Muy buenos días a todos en América Latina.
Hello
Buenas
to
tardes
all
a
of
todos
you,
en el país. Saludar especialmente a Fati Birol de la Agencia
and a
Internacional de
special
Energía,
hello to Fati
Alfonso
Birol,
Blanco de OLADE. Felicitarlos a ambos por el trabajo que
as
hacen.
well as Alfonso from
Por
OLADE.
organizar esta instancia de diálogo que me parece tan importante.
Now,
El
this is an
COVID-19
extremely important theme, of
ha
course.
puesto de manifiesto muchas cosas. Desde luego,
COVID-19 has highlighted many things. First of all, our
para cuidar nuestra salud, la salud
fragility,
queridos de nuestras
the
comunidades,
fragility of our health, as we have seen so many deaths across our region.
cuidándose. Ha puesto de manifiesto también la fragilidad de nuestra economía,
However, we've also seen how fragile
de la región y
our economies are.
más severa de las últimas décadas.
We are experiencing one of the worst crises we've seen in recent decades,
Empleo y así mejorar la calidad de vida de nuestros
which
ciudadanos.
is leading to a loss of jobs and the quality of life in our region.
El desafío que tenemos por delante
And
en
we
materia de cambio climático.
clearly have a large challenge ahead of us in terms of climate change.
Por buenas razones, por el COVID-19, parece dejar de lado la amenaza del
Now,
cambio climático. Lo sabemos bien
often when we speak about COVID-19,
durante la pandemia.
we don't speak about all
De
of the different
manera
projects
más
that have been
estricta
halted
en los distintos países del mundo. En
during
algunas
the
semanas de
pandemic.
mayo, las emisiones cayeron, a
Indeed,
pesar de que muchos países del mundo tenían su actividad económica
although
paralizada.
during the lockdown that took place in March, many countries' economies were completely shut down. This only led to a 10% drop in global emissions.
Puesto en el marco del Acuerdo de París.
And so I believe that we still a lot has to be done if we are to reach objectives of the Paris Accords.
Igual que la crisis económica que se ha generado
Although this crisis is, of course, a challenge, just like with climate change, it represents us an amazing opportunity.
Tal como está en el centro del desafío del cambio climático. En los meses
Indeed, recovery
tenemos que,
from an economic point of view is just as important as recovery and fighting against
atender bien a los clientes, asegurar la
climate
continuidad
change.
del suministro, aliviar los momentos difíciles que muchas familias están pasando.
We need to be able to, in the immediate future, deal with the urgent situation and help all of the families that are suffering so much.
Pero junto con eso,
But along with this, we also need to look forward and look at things in the long term. Chile is one of the countries that is in the middle of an energy transition.
Todas nuestras centrales de generación eléctrica carbón.
Indeed, we have a plan to make sure that all of our coal-powered electricity plants are closed by 2040.
Capacidad antes de 2024. Estamos desarrollando con mucha fuerza nuestras energías renovables.
Are also working very intensely in our renewable energy sector,
y otras energías que nos van a permitir
increasing our potential and looking beyond oil and gas.
Traerla donde está el consumo.
And we also have to look at transition lines so that we can take this renewable energy and bring it to where the consumers actually are,
asegurando la estabilidad y el buen funcionamiento del
as well as also making sure that energy security is taken care of.
También en eficiencia energética.
We are also concentrating a lot in energy efficiency, which is a theme that is often overlooked.
Sobre eficiencia energética, y los números son muy importantes.
And indeed, figures are very important in this area. In the case of Chile, we believe that between 35 and 40% of our total reduction of emissions between now and 2050 will come from energy efficiency policies. We are also focusing on green hydrogen. We believe it's going to make huge contributions in terms of development, economic development, and job creation. But of course, in order for all of this to happen, everyone needs to be rowing in the same direction. This is absolutely essential so that we can share best practices between countries, learn from each other, so that we can make the Latin American market one that is more attractive to foreign investors. This will allow us to use, for example, one country as a reference for others, as a benchmark for other countries. And the interconnections between our two countries will also lead to greater complementarity when it comes to rolling out our projects. So, Yes, we have a major challenge ahead of us, but we can face up to it together. So we can fight against climate change, we can create jobs, and we can create development. And I would once again like to thank the IEA for its actions in the region, and I am convinced that together we will be able to reach our objectives. Thank you.
So we thank very much Minister Jobe, and we were very happy that the IEA worked with the Chilean government very closely in order to put the energy efficiency law for the country. And I am looking forward to join the International Hydrogen Summit on 3rd of November in Chile. Before going to Costa Rica, my colleagues gave me one note just now. In the beginning, I said we are so happy that so many distinguished ministers, Prime Minister of Guyana and the other colleagues joined us, but thousands of people around Latin America and elsewhere are following this through the social media, shows once again how important Latin America and the energy questions in that very region is. Now, I would like to turn to Costa Rica. I am now glad to give the floor to Mr. Rolando Castro, Vice Minister of Energy and Environment of Costa Rica. Mr. Castro, the floor is yours, please.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you to the organizers of this event for inviting us to participate. Costa Rica supports the idea that this crisis shouldn't make us forget our commitments when it comes to the environment and to fighting against climate change. On the contrary, this crisis shows us that we can take measures so that we can face up to other crises that may come in the future linked to climate change. So the energy sector continues being a pillar when it comes to making our countries resilient. Now, in order to overcome the common challenges faced by the energy sector that have been presented by the pandemic, we know that here the SICA countries have promoted a special plan, action plan, sectorial action plan in our region, in Central America, is especially focused on responding to COVID. The SICA countries are trying to make sure that we can achieve universal access to energy for all of the citizens of our region, access to the infrastructure, but also this goes hand in hand with social economic development, and that will lead to making this project one that is supported in a very stable way. Indeed, we can also take advantage of a complementarity that exists between our countries so that we can achieve our electricity objectives. Now, when it comes to energy transmission, to our energy transition, we need to make sure that we can also have different options and a diverse range of options, and also making sure that when some transport systems are up and running again effectively, this does not lead to a difficult situation for our energy sectors. We continue to promote intermittent sources of energy like wave energy, solar energy, and we're also trying to seek advice from other countries or the building experience of other countries with hydrogen and hydropower. We have also started the energy diversification project when it comes to our transport sector, and we have a 2025 plan in this particular area. Indeed, we believe that it's absolutely vital to focus on the electricity sector, but we also have to make sure that we are sharing our experiences across the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Castro. You mentioned hydropower. Unfortunately, when we discussed the electricity and the renewables, the discussion goes directly to solar and wind, which is very good. But many of us forgot how important the hydropower is. Hydropower is today the largest clean source of electricity generation in the world. And I know that, Mr. Castro, your country will host very soon World Hydropower Congress, and I am very much looking forward to attend there with the entire IEA. We are going to support it because we think hydropower's voice is not heard as much as it should be. And this is a very important opportunity to make the world understand how important the hydropower is to address many of the challenges we are talking about. Thank you very much, Mr. Castro. Now, I am delighted to announce our next speaker, President of the Ibero-American Association of Energy Regulators. Energy regulators are very important, and we have Mr. Danobrega, who also heads the Brazilian electricity regulator, ANEL. Mr. Danobrega, the floor is yours, please. Thank you.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Fatih Birol. Let me congratulate Alfonso Blanco. So, distinguished ministers and delegates, I'm speaking to you on behalf of the 27 energy regulators of 20 Ibero-American countries. At this time of uncertainty and crisis at all levels, I would put to you a basic question based on a broader vision of our region. And the question is now the time to speed up the modernization of regulation of the energy sector? Well, my answer is based on optimism and certainty is a big yes. The pandemic has shown up its vulnerabilities, but also its strengths. We emerge from times of crisis with innovation at all levels. In Brazil, despite the fall in demand, the provision of electrical services was maintained at a stable and reliable level. In addition, it was quite clear that clean energies are resilient and they played a greater role in the energy rich and energy mix and contributed to economic recovery on renewable basis. This shows that this is clearly the time to act. It is the time to be strategic and look forward to planning a regulatory agenda based on three basic concepts: resilience, regulatory innovation, and integration. And to conclude, what we said and signed up to in the last IEA conference gives a very clear idea of what the challenge is to us as regulators, which is facilitate the development of the sector and eliminate barriers through technological development and socio-environmental demand at the same time as empowering consumers. We need a very clear conviction in our minds that we need to work together towards this collective future that we all share. So let us stay on track in that respect. Thank you very much, and I greet you all warmly from Brazil.
Thank you very much, Nobrega, and our greetings to Brazil as well. I am grateful to you that you mentioned the modernization, cleanliness of the power sector should go hand in hand with the security of the electricity, because I think we all understood in the times of pandemic how essential the electricity is for our economic and social lives, for our hospitals, for our IT systems, and others. Thank you very much for that, sir. Now, I am going to give the floor now to the president of the CER, the Commission for Regional Energy Integration, and the floor is yours, Mr. Tulio Alves. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Buenos días a todos.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by saying on behalf of SEA that we are grateful for the invitation by IEA-OLADE in the person of Mr. Blanco and the IEA to this event. It's a great honor for us to be here. I would like to greet all the panelists in this session and all those who are involved in it. What I want to say is that this year we have had to face unprecedented challenges. Businesses have had to deal with the effects of the new coronavirus pandemic, and we still have a long way to go to reach our future. The impact of the pandemic is still difficult to gauge, but we see nonetheless there's been a significant fall in demand for energy consumption in virtually all countries, in some of them leading to capacity surplus. And at the same time, the pandemic meant a change in the way we work and in our relationships and our lives in general. Because of the pandemic, we have had to adapt to changes at top speed, at the same time making sure that we guarantee the same quality of technical service as before the pandemic. New technologies have been extremely useful to us. But at the same time, overnight, we had to implement different working patterns with video conferences, telephone calls, etc. All of this means that we are able to control our businesses remotely, maintaining continuity, quality, and security, the levels of customer assistance and support. All of this are using technologies, the sort of technology that enables us to speak to each other today. We believe that this regrettable crisis will become a major opportunity for the reinforcement of integration in our sector using faster digitalization, new network standards, automation, such as smart grids and even smart cities. In addition to this, this crisis shows us regional integration, and in particular energy integration at regional level is one way of achieving a more interconnected market, which will lead to better resilience of energy assistance. So we feel that non-conventional renewables, wind and solar, will enable us to achieve a better integration and is an opportunity to draw on the expertise in our regions, which is one of the best places for solar and wind. This will help us to reduce the consumption of GHG fuels, improving the climate over it, and will enable us to better achieve the Paris commitments. So this crisis is a major opportunity. In our visions, all of us in the power sector and energy sector are doing what we can with boldness and courage to get through this difficult time. But we need to show that we can make a difference and contribute to the growth of the electrical sector. And therefore, we invite everybody in our sector to invest strongly in R&D and new technologies and drive forward innovation. Those were the points I wanted to make. Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this event. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alves, for bringing us this regional perspective. Now, finally, after hearing many authorities, ministers from Latin America, I would like to ask three partners of Latin America from the IEA governing board, three senior members of IEA governing board, Germany, Japan, and United States. I would like to ask them to activate their the cameras. And I would like to start, if I may, with my colleague, Mrs. Ursula Borak from German Minister of Economy. Mrs. Borak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed for giving me the floor. Well, the current health crisis due to COVID-19 shows how crucial the energy sector is for maintaining the economy and thus many jobs, and how it can also act as an important pillar for reactivating the economy after the pandemic. Even though South America was one of the regions that was hit particularly hard by the crisis, we congratulate all countries in the region that have pledged to continue to expand renewables in this difficult year and even focus on the development of new technologies. To highlight one example, Colombia will increase its renewable energy capacity to 2,500 megawatts by 2022 from 50 megawatts in 2018, and is one of the driving forces of the Renewable Energy for Latin America and the Caribbean initiative, which aims to reach a regional share of renewable capacity of 70% by 2030. In Germany, we have continued during the last months our energy transition, and we have integrated the continuation and the expansion of renewable energies into our economic stimulus package. With innovative technologies, countries with a high share of renewable energies, such as Brazil, can also establish their own production chains for green hydrogen, one of the top priorities for Germany, but also for many Latin American countries. The German government has been cooperating with several Latin American countries in this regard, amongst them Brazil and Chile, as part of our bilateral energy partnerships. On the road to climate neutrality by the year 2050, there will certainly be many more areas of joint work. And Germany, and if I may say so, I personally look forward to continuing the existing excellent cooperation with other countries and with the IEA in this direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Borak. Mrs. Borak is at the same time chairing our committee, which is in charge of dealing with the IEA partner countries. Now, may I move to Japan? Now, I would like to ask Mr. Nobuyuki Kikuchi, who is again the board representative of Japan at the IEA governing board. Kikuchi-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bilal. Can you hear me? Because we got a bit of the trouble with the connection. Is that okay now?
Yes, we hear you very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chairs, Dr. Bilal, and Mrs. Blanco, and Excellencies, and congratulations on convening this important event. I am just joined this IEA family very recently by assuming my new positions as the director for the resource and security of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Well, as pointed out by many, I share the view that the world faced unprecedented challenge posed by the COVID-19. But we can see this difficult time as an opportunity for us to move forward. In this regard, I would concur that all energies and all technology approaches is crucial and useful, while there can be a high time for energy transition, including further development of the renewables. I am delighted to learn that there are a positive dynamism and excellent leadership in the Latin and the Caribbean regions, as I heard. Well, here, I would like to share with the esteemed ministers and excellencies here two very simple interests of ours. The first, what will be the best mix of energy sources and carriers in order to overcome this challenge? Second, as technology and innovations are foremost important, I believe, what your strategy for them? We, Japan, will be willing to cooperate with regional players in the many fields of technology, such as energy efficiency, hydrogens, and carbon captures, use and storage, and so on. Thank you.
And last but not least, we go to immediate neighbor of Latin America, to United States, and I am very happy that my colleague, Mr. Ted Garish, the Assistant Secretary of Department of Energy, is going to take the floor. Mr. Garish, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, well, first I'd like to thank and acknowledge Dr. Birol for his outstanding work at IEA and with appreciation for bringing his programs and cooperation to Latin America. There are two main ideas that I would like to touch on today that are critical to recovery. The first is the U.S. approach to maintain prosperity through market-based energy models that utilize all fuels and all technologies and is driven by innovation. As a result, the United States has become the world's largest reducer of carbon emissions while advancing policies that support affordable prices for consumers. According to the IEA, energy-related emissions have fallen in the United States by nearly 1 gigaton since 2000, the largest decline by any country, and this has happened through innovation. We all believe in a clean environment, and the U.S. subscribes to a bottoms-up energy philosophy that honors the choices of producers and consumers alike. There are some energy models governed by top-down approach where the governments are choosing the winners and losers, and in some cases to favor state-owned companies. We have seen the impact in our own state of California that has rushed to shut down baseload sources of power like natural gas and nuclear energy in favor of renewables. The result has been major blackouts during the heat wave this summer. California assumed that they could import power from their neighbors when they needed it, but it turned out that it got hot all over America, and especially in the West, and folks in neighboring states like their air conditioning just as much as those in California. So when California needed it, the power they needed was not available. The renewables weren't enough to power what they needed. The important thing about energy is that it's there when you need it, and the importance of baseload power. Latin America has a unique opportunity for baseload through its use of hydropower, and also an opportunity for new clean nuclear power. Between hydropower and developments in civil nuclear energy in Latin America, they could lead the rest of the world in zero carbon baseload electricity, a very important potential for that region of the world. This brings me to the second point I'd like to touch on, and that is investment. Innovative ideas and diverse energy supplies are great in theory, but these types of changes take investment, and investment is needed now more than ever. The U.S. is looking for investments in countries that utilize free market principles, including transparency, the sanctity of contracts, and the rule of law. And the United States stands ready to support investments and develop markets in countries that adhere to these principles. We now have an active Export-Import Bank and the Development Finance Corporation, formerly known as OPEC, working to bring U.S. industry and innovation to world markets. So as we return to the new normal after the rise of COVID-19, the United States stands ready to help our neighbors in the Americas to fully develop our energy potential cooperatively. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Back to you, Dr. Burrell.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Garish. And dear colleagues, it's a very rich discussion, different perspectives from different parts of the world, of course, focusing on Latin America. But I think we all agree that the electricity is essential for our social life, for our economic lives. And I was very impressed to see that the many ministers see the crisis we are facing today as an opportunity to have cleaner and more affordable and more secure electricity systems. This is excellent. And hearing the ministers and the colleagues in Latin America, once again, I am convinced how many options that the countries in Latin America have for electricity, from solar, wind, bioenergy, hydrogen, nuclear power. Some of you mentioned. Some of you mentioned the hydropower. Huge potential there, and the important thing is how to use it in the best way, an innovative way, and of course, to get them on board needs right government policies and your leadership in order to create investments to see those projects see the light of the day. I'm grateful to all of you, and I can assure you all the colleagues following this in Latin America, your countries are in safe hands with this leadership. Now, with this, I would like to turn to my colleague Alfonso for the second session, which is going to focus on the Latin America's oil and gas sector. Alfonso, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatih Birol. I will be the moderator of the session 2. The main topic, as Dr. Birol said, of this session will be to discuss the impacts on the Latin American and the Caribbean oil and gas sector, identifying the challenges and the opportunities after the COVID pandemic. Well, I will switch to Spanish because most of our panelists will speak in Spanish. Por lo tanto, muchas gracias.
So let me say thank you very much.
And
I would like to invite.
I would now like to invite. Excuse me.
See if I can find it.
I would like to invite the.
I would invite the Minister of Brazil.
To
followed by the Minister of
log on
Ecuador
or to activate their camera, as well as the Minister from Ecuador.
Go ahead,
welcome. Excellencies.
So, Your Excellencies,
Minister of Mines and Energy of
we
Brazil,
have
Bento
His Excellency Bento
Albuquerque,
Albuquerque, Minister of Mines and Energy of Brazil,
Rene
and His Excellency Rene Ortiz Duran,
Minister of Energy
Minister
and
of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources. Welcome to you, sirs. We have reached a stage
in which the
energy sector, in particular
the
oil and gas
sector, is having being
impacted by the instability of prices on international markets,
international prices, prices of hydrocarbons,
investments in our region,
and indeed
moving into unconventional renewables, and all of this, of course, is dependent upon international prices and the costs in our region. And of course, there's the impact of taxation on the oil and gas industry. So I think all of these issues are going to be part of our debate this afternoon. And we will be hearing from other speakers from our region. So could I perhaps first give the floor to His Excellency Bento Albuquerque. You have the floor, sir.
Estimado secretário executivo Alfonso Blanco.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary of OLADE, Alfonso Blanco. Distinguished Minister for Energy of Ecuador, Rene Ortiz Duran, and with the presence of the Dr. Fatih Birol, dear friend, and indeed one of the main advocates of energy and integration, representatives of the IEA. In Brazil, with the exception of liquefied petrol gas, which the consumption of which increased during the lockdown period, saw an initial drop in the consumption of fossil fuels in the car industry and kerosene in the aviation industry. However, since the month of May, we have seen a gradual and permanent recovery. With the exception of aviation kerosene, the levels of consumption of fossil fuels are now returning to normal. I have to say that despite the impact of COVID, the national hydrocarbon sector has shown signs of resilience since the first months of the pandemic. The production of oil and gas and the supply of fossil fuels remained stable. Petrobras, we have seen, recently celebrated its 67th birthday, and its actions in the production and exportation of hydrocarbons have been notable in 2020. Petrobras broke its exports record in the month of April with 1 million barrels exported. Now, we have also seen that there has been that Petrobras has also now turned its attentions back to its natural vocation in collaboration with its shareholders, focusing on deep water and ultra deep water oil exploration. The company continues its disinvestment of its assets in areas such as refining, natural gas, and distribution. And indeed, as well as new investments, the selling off of some of these assets is also generating jobs and income. Many of these different sectors of activity that were sold off by Petrobras are doing very well. Some of them have been reactivated and others are growing in productivity at a rate of 30%. We are seeing signs that this process is on the right track, and this process should continue. Brazil will continue to stimulate its economic recovery through promoting an open market in this area, and we have some examples of what we have planned. This year, in December, we will see the second round of the permanent supply auctions for the exploration and production of oil and gas. There are more than 700 such projects in mature fields and the onshore sector, and there are 57 small and medium-sized companies from 13 countries involved. In the second half of 2021, there will be an auction for the surplus that was created by after the closing down of Presal. And there will also be rounds for concessions number 17 and 18, which will take place in 2022. We are also able to announce with satisfaction the program of the new market for gas, which was carried out with large-scale support from the IEA, and it's based in 4 main priority areas: competitiveness, the integration of the electricity sector, regulatory harmonization, and elimination of tariffs and other such trade barriers. By opening up the gas sector, we are making it more attractive to new stakeholders. And we will see that we have seen that demand for gas has increased 29%. This is what we're hoping for. We're also hoping that domestic production increases 100% and that we can attract investment. Indeed, we also are taking into account the environmental dimension. Our energy mix is clean, diverse, and renewable, and it's a question of energy security for Brazil. And gas will play a role in this context. Dear ministers, thank you once again for the opportunity to be here amongst friends. And I consider that this type of event is extremely important for our region and for the increased cooperation integration of our region. To the OLADE and to the IEA, I'd like to thank you for the work that you have carried out very intensively. And thank you to all of you for your contributions. Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much for your comments. You've also spoken about a fundamental sector, which we're also working on which is also being worked on at the IEA, is also when it comes to gathering information so that political decision-making can be more effective. This is work that was carried out regarding your gas project. And there was also another issue, that is that of transparency, which is also fundamental, so that investment can be a fundamental driving force of the economies in our countries. Moving on now, I would like to give the floor to the Minister of Energy and Non-Renewable Natural Resources of Ecuador. Minister Rene Ortiz Duran, welcome. The floor is yours for your speech. Thank you. Thank you. First and foremost, I would like to extend my greetings to all of you who are participating in this event. I'd like to congratulate you on the initiative of the OLADE and the International Energy Agency. Both of these institutions have a rich and noteworthy history, especially when it comes to crisis situations. They are always present. And I would like to thank them for this initiative, bringing us all together as energy ministers focusing on natural resources here in Latin America. We also have participation from some European countries too, and indeed, Fatih Birol is a person who I have crossed on many occasions. And indeed, also greetings to Mr. Blanco, who is, of course, our host, coming from Quito. Now, when it comes to the energy sector, or more specifically the oil and gas sector, there are certain particularities. And this is something in this sector, and this is something that's vital for our sector. There are some fiscal, or rather some tax-related issues that are important for us, because when it comes to tax income, Ecuador is also involved in the decarbonization of our energy sector. However, as we have an abundance of natural resources in our country, we have all kinds of natural resources in our country, and indeed we wish to be able to exploit all of them. However, over the years, we have seen that fossil fuels and oil will continue to form part of our energy mix. We have made huge leaps forward when it comes to respecting the environment. For example, we have developed oil exploration in certain regions of the Amazon, in the Green Sea, as it's often called in the Amazon region. And we have always done this with the utmost responsibility when it comes to protecting the environment in these areas. Now we have a historic moment ahead of us in terms of two areas in particular. First of all, we're at a moment where we have to break down the monopoly that exists in our state, in our countries. And we also need to make sure that we can attract investment. These are two areas that have not that we have not stopped working on even during the pandemic. We are trying to reduce the role of the state, or the involvement of the state in this sector, and we're also making changes in terms of the empresarial actions in this sector. Of course, we want to make sure that private participation in the sector is a reality, whether it be in companies from within Ecuador or from elsewhere. Now, there are negotiations that are underway so that certain parts of our energy sector can be transferred to the private sector, so that these private stakeholders, for example, will be able to have access to parts of this market and operate parts of this market over 25 or 30 years, at least, for example. What does this mean? This means that these natural resources, which will then be transformed into fuels, will be the object of a transfer. That is, of course, the object that will, of course, be the object of negotiations. That is to say that there is a process underway, an active process, so that we can face up to the situation of technical obsolescence that we are seeing in the public sector. We're going to need a complete overhaul of these sectors, and that is the process that we are in right now. And that is why we are inviting the private sector to participate, because the public sector no longer has the intention of manufacturing, transforming, and supplying these energy in these different sectors. So the legal aspects of all of this mean that we have negotiations underway. For example, when it comes to liquefied oil, this is a sector that could be transferred to the private sector. Also in the electrical sector, because the power sector is extremely pro-climate change, let's say. There is a large percentage of companies in this sector that are are renewable, that are exploiting renewable energy, and 77% of them in the hydro sector. This isn't just about current negotiations. It's also when it comes to new activities that may arise, new undertakings, because Ecuador, during this pandemic, also was an exporter of electricity to some of our neighboring countries, particularly to Colombia. We have become an exporter, and we have become a trustworthy exporter when it comes to electricity and power. And indeed, our economy, which is one that is also very dependent on the dollar, is now trying to undergo this dollarization, let's say, of our economy, so that we can stabilize our economy. So right now, we, as I have said before, there are many calls for tender that have been issued by the government, and this is going to completely change the way that these resources are produced and provided over the next 25, 30 years. This is the context in which we are working, and that's what I wanted to get across to you during this session that has been organized by the IEA and the OLADE, for the participation of all of the other ministers here today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister Ortiz, for your contribution. I think there's something that we all share here, which is the focus on the contribution of the private sector to economic recovery and the use of private investment as a driver of this. We are now going to broaden the scope a little, and we're going to invite the Undersecretary for Energy Planning in the Secretary of Energy of Argentina, and the Executive Secretary of ARPEL and the President of ARPEC. We ask you to activate your cameras. We would ask you to stick to your allotted speaking time, though. Otherwise, we're going to run out of time. So I would ask you to stick to your speaking time or even less. Let me thank you in advance for that. So I give the floor to Dr. Javier Papa, who is Undersecretary of Energy Planning, Secretariat of Energy in Argentina. Welcome. Thank you very much, Executive Secretary Mr. Blanco. Let me start by saying that in the Argentinian Secretary for Energy, we feel that the government plays a key role in generating public policy and for mitigating the adverse impact on the energy sector. What we need is a sustainable, sovereign system. I know the question here is, what can we do to reply to the long-term impacts of COVID in our sector? Firstly, we have done several things, and namely freeze the tariffs at the end of the year. There will be no cutting off of services to people on social benefits. Then we have the implementation of Decree 48820, so-called Barril Carrillo, which is a measure to support production by implementing a supporter price. And then we have developed a long-term stimulus program to generate long-term contracts for the production of natural gas. And we hope that will help us to reverse the fall in production in 2020. As for the second question, how can Latin America take advantage of its abundant oil and gas reserves in the post-COVID time? Well, you have to realize that the natural gas is Argentina's largest energy resource, 58% of its total. As you know, Argentina is the country with the second largest non-conventional natural gas resources and the fourth in terms of non-conventional oil. The development of non-conventional resources, in particular in the Vaca Muerta deposit, has led to a resurgence in oil and gas production in our country. We should underline that Vaca Muerta has demonstrated productivity similar to the best in the United States. At the moment, only 4% of that deposit is being exploited, which shows that there's huge potential here. We hope that soon, when the world markets have recovered, Vaca Muerta will do more than just produce exportable surpluses. And we hope that it will be the same for gas, that we should be able to export to our neighbors. And then last question, what can governments do to shape the future of the sector and guarantee safe and sustainable and balanced energy in the area? Well, we in Argentina support the idea that natural gas is a key component of energy transition in our country. And Argentina has plotted a path which will mean we will replace in the medium term and in a phased manner various fossil fuels, those that are responsible for most contamination. And so we feel that as part of our commitment to greater diversification, sustainability in energy, we are promoting various energy efficiency policies and the greater use of biofuels in this sector of transport. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Papa, for that contribution. There are some key parts of your contribution there. In particular, I'm thinking of the role of public policy at this time of recovery and the use of natural gas. I would say that's what I take away most from your contribution. I would now like to turn to ARPEL, Regional Association of Oil and Gas and Biofuel Sector, comes to Latin America. Miguel Moyano, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Let me greet all the participants this afternoon. I thank you very much for inviting us to take part in this event. As Mr. Blanco said, ARPEL is the Regional Association of Oil and Gas and Biofuel Sectors in our region. Oil and gas represents 70% of energy in Latin America and Caribbean, so it's a major partner in sustainable development. Maintaining the necessary supply in oil and gas means a sustained volume of investment, which is beyond what most governments can do alone. And as such, they will not be able to achieve their SDG goals. This is why ARPEL believes that we need public-private partnerships, reconciling the needs and expectations of public companies, private companies, so that together we can cover the energy demands through oil and gas. ARPEL is the only oil and gas regional association, and its mission includes promoting energy integration in the regions so that countries can develop their natural gas resources and accelerate the transition to renewable energies, drawing on idle infrastructure that exists, our resources and complementarity of energy demand between countries in the region. Today, for the last 55 years, ARPEL and its companies are partners willing to work together with the governments to support the countries in the region in order to achieve their targets of energy transition and sustainable development. Thank you very much to all. Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. And thank you very much for speeding up and sticking to your allotted time.
Of the Asia and Pacific Energy Research Center. The floor is yours, Mr. Kazutomo.
Thank you, Mr. Blanc. I'm Kazutomo Irie, President of the Asia Pacific Energy Research Center, APAC. It is a great honor to participate in this important dialogue. At APAC, we study the energy dynamics across the 21 members of the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC. APEC includes 3 Latin American economies, Peru, Chile, and Mexico, with the last 2 being members of IEA-OLADE and the IEA simultaneously. I would like to point out 3 issues from our research interest in oil and gas sector, which I believe are also relevant to all Latin American countries. First, the ongoing pandemic has reminded us the importance for countries on investing on energy security, especially in storage and transportation of oil products. In the short term, the world is experiencing an oversupply of refined products, and crude oil production is projected to fall. However, in the medium term, this may impact negatively on the availability of such fuels for major oil product importers in the region, such as Mexico or Peru. This would ultimately mean fuel scarcity and an obstacle for energy affordability. APAC is currently working on these issues as part of the APEC Oil and Gas Security Initiative, with a report focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on energy security, which will be available in next year. Second, through the future, APAC believes it is critical for governments to include provisions on low carbon energy transition in recovery package. As in some countries in the Asia Pacific region, the role of natural gas in the low carbon energy transition in Latin America will be critical in the coming years, particularly on its role to integrate intermittent wind and solar power and reducing more pollutant fuels such as fuel oil and coal. Thirdly, Latin America has the potential to achieve a more profound integration in their energy sectors. A positive experience to draw upon lessons is the ongoing integration achievement done by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, including cross-border power transmission lines and pipelines. Finally, APAC vows to continue collaborating in research and energy policy analysis and cross-institutional cooperation projects like this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your intervention. It's very, very important to have this collaboration between regions. Finally, I invite Spain representative and U.S. State Department to activate the cams, please. Mr. Juan Bautista Sanchez Piñuela, Governing Board representative at the International Energy Agency of Spain, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Buenas tardes, muchas gracias.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Blanco. First and foremost, I would like to thank the previous speakers from Mr. Albuquerque and Ortiz Duran, as well as Mr. Papa, with regards to the reforms that are being carried out in their countries in the oil sector. We have listened in particular to how Brazil is implementing a very ambitious set of reforms for the new gas market in order to enhance competitiveness and to reduce the final price that end users pay. We are conscious of the support that the agency provided to this process in the different fora and working groups. Our ministry has given its own views on this and has offered its experiences. Indeed, the drop in gas prices is important in the context of these reforms. Firstly, because the drop in prices will mean that subsidies will progressively be phased out for fossil fuels companies, and this would also help for the more swift development, more rapid development of renewable energies. And secondly, this will be renewable gases, such as those that originate from biomass and biogas, will also be able to enter the fray, as it were, gases such as clean hydrogen. In the current context, that is to say that of COVID-19, we highlight, we underscore the need to put clean energy at the heart of our coverage plans so that we can generate growth and jobs in a sustainable way, so that the investments can help to speed up the completion of our objectives when it comes to energy and climate, both in Spain but also in the European Union, in particular that of reaching climate neutrality by 2050. In order to promote better integration of these clean energies, we believe that renewable gases can play a very important role, very relevant role, in cases where electrification is not technically possible or is not perhaps the most effective solution. In the case of Spain, our government approved this Tuesday the hydrogen roadmap and is working on a biogas roadmap as well. Therefore, we are delighted to be able to work alongside our Latin American colleagues in the field of technology and regulation in these different sectors. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez,
for your intervention.
I will invite the Ambassador Virginia Palmer from the U.S. Department of State, the governing board representative for the U.S. in the International Energy Agency. The floor is yours, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, please allow me to say all protocols observed. I'm very honored to be in such a distinguished gathering. And I'd like to thank the IEA-OLADE and the IDB for bringing us all together. I think these regionally focused meetings are particularly useful. We'd also like to thank Prime Minister Phillips, Minister Puyo, and Minister Beto Albuquerque for the warm welcome accorded to Secretary Pompeo when he visited your countries recently. The theme of that trip, among other things, was the continued importance of oil and gas to sustainable economic development. And I'm delighted to be able to comment on that a little bit more this morning. The United States is working to address the energy demand challenge posed by COVID-19's demand destruction and to reduce energy disruptions. We are seeing demand recovery begin, and we know that that will continue to grow. In 2014, the world will require 50% more energy than we produce today, and oil and gas will continue to be major fuel sources, especially for the transportation industry. And I note that the Honorable Minister from Ecuador also noted that same fact. As we look in our own region and look at the economy of Guyana almost double as a result of exploitation of their very rich resources, it highlights the importance that the resource can have on economies in the region, and also the importance of strong regulatory environments and investment climates to ensuring that we have world-class investments in those energy sectors. Brazil, too, has been winning significant foreign investment for its offshore oil blocks, and the minister highlighted work to achieve regulatory harmonization, which I think is very important. We've also seen a lot of progress on proposed legislative reforms to create a competitive natural gas sector. U.S. companies continue to be active in Argentina's Vaca Muerta shale play, and I'm pleased by talks of a potential natural gas pipeline between Vaca Muerta and Porto Alegre in Brazil. Connecting these markets demonstrates the importance of private investment in enhancing regional economic integration and ensuring affordable access to energy for citizens across the region. U.S. companies are very interested in investment and trade in the region, and we're hoping that they will find a level playing field when they enter. We look forward to supporting your efforts to do that, particularly under America Crece, to create the right economic and regulatory conditions to attract all kinds of foreign investors, but particularly we hope American investors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Palmer. It was a pleasure to moderate this session. I will switch to Spanish. Algunos elementos para cerrar esta muy
So
rica.
just a few elements for closing this session. First and foremost, we can see that oil and gas is at the center of the economic recovery of our region. We cannot forget that. It's also part of Latin America and the Caribbean's future. We have major opportunities in our region when it comes to decarbonization, and the oil and gas sector is actually associated to this. And indeed, it is also trying to make the most of the resources that we have. And we also see that this traditional sector of oil and gas is also involved in the transition towards new non-conventional energy sources that are based in renewable energies. So here we see the challenges facing this sector as part of an economic recovery and a post-COVID-19 era. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. It was a pleasure for me to be able to moderate this session. And now I will hand over to Ariel Yepes of the IDB, who is going to moderate the third session. We are 30 minutes behind schedule. So I apologize for the time that we have lost, but thank you very much to all of our panelists. Thank you, Alfonso. So we're now going to begin session 3, which is linked to the recovery of the energy sector and economies in general in a sustainable way, with inclusiveness at the heart of everything. And before giving the floor to our honorable guests, I would just like to just share two thoughts with you. Firstly, when it comes to access and the situation in which we find ourselves in Latin America, it's fundamental so that we can work towards universal access to electricity by 2030 as part of our United Nations targets, and we're close. We're at 97% in general in Latin America. However, there are certain countries with major challenges still. We need to only 25 billion euros to close this gap. And countries are working very intensively to reach this objective. And there is another important issue I'd like to touch upon, and that is closing the gender gap. The energy sector has major challenges when it comes to allowing women to access the sector, not only to take up jobs in the sector, especially management jobs, but also being involved in activities that will lead us to have a more productive energy sector. It is believed that only 7% of women in Latin America are in leadership roles. And it's also believed that the gender gap is responsible for 15% of the gap that we have in the drop that we have in our GDP. Now, of course, we still have a major gender gap in many developing countries, but there's a lot that we can do. At the IDB, we are putting forward policies, initiatives, so that women can be part of the future of the region. For example, helping different businesses in the sector so that they can put in place measures to promote women and women in leadership roles. In fact, OLADE, in partnership with OLADE, which is also at the forefront of this initiative, we are planning a major event so that we can continue to promote this to promote this initiative. So that's what we'll be speaking about: sustainable recovery and inclusiveness.
Honorable Prime Minister Brigadier Mark Phillips to open his microphone, and to Alberto Pimentel Mata, Minister of Energy and Mines of Guatemala. Please, Prime Minister Mark Phillips, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Ariel Yepes. In the interest of time, all protocols observed. It is a pleasure to be here today to participate in this high-level dialogue on the regional energy agenda for a post-COVID-19 era. The pandemic has affected us all and has brought extraordinary challenges on the road to recovery. I thank the International Energy Agency, Latin American Energy Organization, and the Inter-American Development Bank for organizing this important event, which seeks to engage countries in the region on sustainable and resilient recovery efforts. In this post-COVID-19 era, Guyana's policy commitments include its Low Carbon Development Strategy, LCDS, which outlines Guyana's goals to deliver greater economic and social development for the people of Guyana within a low carbon and climate resilient economy that maintains low deforestation rates and uses its resources efficiently and sustainably over generations. In this regard, the government of Guyana aims to provide affordable, stable, and reliable energy to benefit both households and businesses, and will pursue a program with an energy mix that includes hydropower, natural gas, solar, and wind, which will lead to more than 400 megawatts of newly installed capacity for residential and commercial users over the next 5 years, and a reduction in the cost of energy by at least 50%. The government will also take urgent action to improve and upgrade the national grid for transmission and distribution of power. Our government is committed to implementing the following measures as part of our energy diversification and access initiatives: completion of the Amelia Falls hydroelectric project, investigating and exploring all possibilities for the use of natural gas for electricity production, investment in solar and wind systems for off-grid areas, expansion of the hinterland electrification program, where an upgrade and replacement of solar photovoltaic systems is expected for some 25,000 households in hinterland and riverine communities. Development of solar photovoltaic microgrids for large hinterland areas, and the development of mini hydropower grid-tied systems in the hinterland towns of Guyana. These actions will lead to a modernized energy sector with an increased mix of clean and renewable resources that provides affordable, reliable, and clean energy services for all in the most sustainable manner. To the question, how can the region ensure energy access to all Latin Americans, and how can inclusiveness be addressed as an integral part of recovery measures? We believe, in answering the question, we believe and advocate for the following: the support for the renewable energy transition throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Access to grant funding and concessional financing will go a long way to facilitate this type of technology in hinterland and remote communities, not only in Guyana, but throughout Latin America and the Caribbean. Data collection and knowledge sharing is another important area. At the regional level, sharing of policies, programs, and projects will decrease the learning curve for developing countries in the region, countries like Guyana. Again, capacity building and consistent community engagement is important, and we believe that a gender-balanced approach to training, career opportunities, and support for lifelong learning will also facilitate the participation of more women in the sector. Finally, the government of Guyana is committed towards achieving a low-carbon economy, and advancing the transition to renewable energy development will remain at the forefront of our national priority. I look forward to continued dialogue and opportunities for future collaboration to realize sustainable, inclusive, and resilient energy systems throughout the Latin American Caribbean region. And I thank you for allowing me to participate in this conference today.
Many thanks, Honorable Prime Minister Mark Phillips. This is really ambitious agenda that you are pushing forward in Guyana, and we are glad to hear that you are working in a huge commitment to reduce the energy access gap and the gender gap as well. Happy to hear that, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Ahora voy a dar la palabra.
Now I'm going to give
Now
the
I will
floor
give the floor
to
the Minister of Energy and Mines for
Guatemala Minister of
Guatemala,
Energy and Mines,
Minister Alberto Pimentel Mata, so that he
who
can
will
speak
be
about the
talking to us
challenges
about
faced in his
these
country. You have the floor.
challenges in his country. You have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. Let me start by greeting the members of OLADE, and of course our friends and colleagues in IEE and IDB. And above all, thank you very much for inviting me to this panel. I would also like to greet my experts and colleagues from other countries who have taken part in the panel. It's now my pleasure to speak to you as part of this virtual high-level dialogue to think about how we can make a sustainable recovery more inclusive and leave no one behind. So what does this last phrase mean? Necessarily, it means that we have to ensure the availability of energy resources for all, in particular, those who have greatest needs. And this means we need to improve the electrical energy coverage in the region. So let me say something about Guatemala. And we know that it's been said that Latin America has done very well with something like 90% more coverage. In our country, it is only 88% on average, which is intolerable in the middle of the 21st century. And if we look at this figure, and we see the difference between urban and rural areas. In rural areas, the coverage is barely 75%. This is a major challenge, and it's clear that this is the case for my government. Since we entered office in January of this year, we have been working on achieving a consistent energy coverage, and therefore one of the main measures in our energy policy is to increase the rate of coverage to 93.5% by 2023. And this means that we have a tough task ahead of us in terms of investment in electrical transmission infrastructure and modernization of the national grid. And we have to take forward a plan for expanding the generation and transmission system, because this is vital before we can look at the problems of the distribution system. In order to achieve these targets, The government's policy contains strategic actions to take forward the development of energy sources that are compatible with environmental protection, because we feel that there can only be the growth of the national economy if energy is affordable, cheap, and based on renewable sources. Our priority as a government is to help the neediest in our society, and this includes the peoples that are in poverty and extreme poverty. And to a large extent, this is the indigenous peoples in our country. And this is why we have planned to increase the opportunities for access, gender-balanced access to energy supplies. It will be good for the people in general, but for women and their health. So we are looking at ways of reducing the use of water and of wood and water connection. About 60% of our population still uses wood for cooking purposes. And this is something that shouldn't exist in the 21st century. So we want to provide energy supplies to these communities, which will improve the lot of women, because it will mean they will have to spend less time on domestic tasks. We know that if we support women, we support families, and therefore improve sustainability for the population. And so it's also important to improve hiring, technical vocational training practices that are free of any gender bias, so as to achieve better inclusion of women in the various activities of the sector, which is vital for our developments. In this context, we have to remember that the lack of progress in our country, which is due to the lack of basic services and energy consumption that is not sustainable with our natural resources. All this has a negative impact in the short, medium, and long term, and hits vulnerable sectors even more. So to deal with this, we are working hard and taking forward a policy which is based on social and productive development through efficient energy supply. This is important for all of the communities of our country, but above all, rural electrification is one of the top priorities. So how can we achieve this? So one of the main strategies in the government's general policy will be to promote environmentally sustainable use of energy sources. And we have to work more on clean and renewable energy. We need to find sustainable sources and reduce GHGs. I would like to point out that in order to achieve these goals, we have to promote investment in electrical transmission infrastructure, and that will have a major positive impact on distribution. If we neglect this, in the short term, there might be experiments that will lead nowhere, particularly for the vulnerable parts of our society. In conclusion, I would like to underline the importance of the expansion plan for our generation system. I remind you that Guatemala has made major progress through its rural electrification projects, which were financed through the National Institute for Electrification, which is a state undertaking and the largest generator in the country that is working for the benefit of our population. So this is what we are trying to do to improve the situation in the country. Thank you very much for your attention. I'd like to thank you also for doing everything you can to commit to energy as a major alternative to take forward all of our countries. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. Minister Mata. It's very interesting to hear all these different challenges that you have, and gives us all great inspiration and motivation, because this is a very ambitious work plan that you are trying to take forward in terms of inclusion, sustainable development, and give everyone greater access to energy. I'd now like to open to other speakers. Acting Secretary of State for Energy of Honduras, Mr. Leonardo Diaz, and Mr. Ryan Cobb, Director of Energy, Ministry of Public Service, Energy and Public Utilities in Belize. Please activate your cameras. And I'd now like to give you the floor, starting with the Secretary of State for Energy from Honduras.
Thank you, Ariel, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all a very good day. It is a sort of pleasure for me to be able to speak to you today on behalf of the Secretary of State for Energy and on behalf of President Juan Orlando Hernandez. And I thank the IEA and OLADE for inviting us to participate in this Ministerial Roundtable. In Honduras, COVID-19 appeared in our country in the month of March, when the first case was declared in our country, the first positive case. A national state of emergency was decreed. And since then, we have seen some major changes in deployment on the part of our operating system in the sector of energy. We saw a very swift and abrupt drop in demand, and that led to curtailment of, for example, levels of curtailment, rising levels of curtailment amongst our solar power generators in the south of the country. However, at the same time, we saw that geothermic plants increased their deployment given the low marginal costs. Indeed, there's also this economic destabilization has also led to a delay in the rollout of certain projects linked to renewable energies. We have also seen an impact on the state-run companies, and we've seen a 7% drop in sales, a 4% drop in tax income, and we have also seen an increase in debt in the first half of 2020 compared with 2019, 30% in the residential sector and 15% in the commercial and industrial sector. The arrival of COVID-19 has generated huge challenges for us in terms of trying to strike the right balance between protecting human lives and making sure that we can maintain the economy, keep the economy on its feet. This highlights the challenge that exists in terms of making sure that we can have a dynamic supply and demand in our electrical energy sector. And we are convinced that clean energy and renewable energy, which is affordable, will be the path to take so that we can mitigate the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. Indeed, renewable energies can give us solutions in regions where the electrical grid is not very reliable or indeed almost inexistent. For example, in areas where access to energy for health centers and schools is critical, clean energy can provide solutions which can be implemented very swiftly, as well as decentralized systems of energy outside of the main electrical grid so that they can support local economies. Therefore, we consider that the post-COVID-19 era and the recovery that will come with it needs to make sure that it leaves nobody behind, and we need to make sure that we have modern energy sources so that we can reach out to those in isolated areas. We can create micro-electric grids based on renewable energy, independent solar power systems, and, for example, geothermic solutions that can be directly used in the same areas where the energy is produced, as well as other alternatives. With this in mind, we believe that the support that can be given to us by the International Energy Agency and all other partners, such as in any kind of advice or help that we can receive, will be able to help us to move forward with our efforts in this post-COVID-19 era. Thank you.
Honduras, Leonardo Deras, muy interesantes.
Thank you very much for your words. Very interesting. All of the different points that you made and the work agenda that you have in Honduras at the moment. Congratulations on that. Now I'd like to give the floor to the Ministry of Public Service, Energy and Public Utilities from Belize, Mr. Ryan Cobb. So I'm going to be speaking in English.
Thank you for inviting Belize to speak at this prestigious event. COVID-19 has disproportionately affected the vulnerable population of Latin America and the Caribbean, driving them further into hardships and poverty. While many countries are still fighting to ensure health for their citizens, we must also focus on economic recovery. Economic recovery cannot occur without investments in sustainable energy. These investments must focus on increasing the use of sustainable power and solar power, not only for electricity generation, but also for the agricultural sector, who have stepped up during these difficult times to feed our people when many countries thought it necessary to close their borders, which made it very difficult to import basic provisions such as food. National policies that are in line with regional policies will allow for greater opportunities of synergies. Belize is currently finalizing a competitive process for the procurement of baseload power so that we can further invest in larger quantities of variable renewable power. In addition to this, we are also working with other regional bodies such as SECA to harmonize energy efficiency standards for domestic electrical appliances that one not only saves money for the average consumer, but improves their financial situation and well-being. With the assistance of international partners, Belize, along with other Caribbean nations, are conducting integrated resource and resilience planning that not only addresses the inclusiveness of energy, but also the gender gap that currently exists in the sector. A strong and inclusive energy sector will ensure prosperity for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan Cobb. That agenda as well, it's an ambitious one, and it's really good to know all the things that you are doing in Belize. Happy to know that. Now I will open the floor for the next. Our next speaker is Ambassador Virginia Palmer, representative of the government of the United States. The floor is yours, Ambassador Palmer.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief, but would like to express appreciation for the comments made about the energy gap and also the gender gap, and reiterate the United States' willingness to support in any way we can. As we talk about inclusiveness and sustainable recovery, I would echo my colleague from Japan's comments about utilizing all sources and all technologies. Under the Growth in America's America Crece initiative, the United States' goal is to catalyze private investment in energy and infrastructure and expand affordable and reliable energy access. We believe regional power markets enhance resiliency, optimizing the region's natural resources, creating larger markets that help projects' viability, and taking advantage of seasonal complementarity. I understand there's progress on creating an Andean regional power market with support from the Inter-American Development Bank, and we encourage Andean electricity interconnection efforts, and again, stand ready to assist if technical assistance is required. On the topic of social and economic development, I want to mention another initiative that ENR leads to support energy sustainability. We've talked a lot about clean energy technologies, but they are very mineral intensive. And it's crucial that as demand for energy mineral explodes, that we ensure that those markets are benefiting local communities, but also attracting world-class investment. So we have an initiative with Peru, Canada, Botswana, and Australia, and welcome participation from all the countries on the line to promote sound mining sector governance and resilient energy mineral supply chains. COVID-19 has certainly revealed the vulnerability of supply chains. My colleague from from Belize just noted that. That certainly applies to energy minerals as well. And we're also hearing from the private sector and consumers that they want responsibly sourced energy minerals. So we hope that there will be a demand signal from battery manufacturers, wind and solar technology manufacturers that they want to use responsibly sourced minerals. So again, the United States stands ready to assist where possible with the energy gap, with the gender gap, and on all of these clean energy technologies, including the minerals necessary to produce them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Palmer. And well, this is the end of this session. And it is really motivating to hear our distinguished representatives from governments in the region about the way they are pursuing these fantastic objectives of closing the gap in energy access and closing as well the gender gap. Very motivating, and thanks a lot to all of you for your participation, for your words, and for letting us know what you are doing in your governments to move forward the agenda of inclusiveness with sustainable recovery. Now I will move forward to the closing remarks and conclusions, and I will open the table to Mr. Alfonso Blanco and to Fatih Birol.
Muchas gracias, Ariel.
Thank you very much, Ariel. I know we're running a bit late, but I'm very pleased to see what we've achieved with our panels today. So I think we can say that we've had a very rich, open and honest dialogue in every sense. And I think we have managed to hear from high officials in the region, as well as input from people from outside, the IEA and other partners in this event. So I need to try to make some closing remarks after this really meaningful event. It's not going to be easy to sum up in 2 or 3 minutes everything that's been said with respect to what's going to happen post-COVID and trying to understand the impact of the pandemic on our economies and how we can use the energy sector to drive that recovery. But it's not just about economic recovery. We also need to look at reduction of poverty, create jobs, and overall improve the living conditions of our populations. First and foremost, I want to highlight one factor that I think came through in all the discussions. We know there is a gender gap in our region, and this is particularly clear in events like this. We can see that in the energy sector, we still need more inclusivity, more inclusion of women at decision-making levels in our regions. We need to work very hard on that. And we also have to take advantage of the opportunities provided by the pandemic to reduce this gender gap in our region. So I would say that is one major takeaway from this event, because to a certain extent, we are responsible for this, and therefore we need to be a change agent in this respect. Another factor I want to underscore is that this pandemic means we have to rethink our strategies and how we define, develop our policies, and take a new look at the way our region uses energy in our economies. We know there are going to be major impacts, as the various ministers have said, There's going to be a major impact on the energy sector in the region. But there's also agreement around the fact that the pandemic forces us to identify new opportunities, the possibilities for making structural change in our sector and business, taking into account environmental and technological factors. It's all about innovation and R&D. These, of course, will be key drivers for improving the health of everybody in our region. But we have different situations because there's the Caribbean, there's Central America, there's Latin America, and we don't all have the same issues, but I think we share the responsibility for improving the situation, taking into account the specific needs of each of our players. I think that comes through clearly from what we've heard from the speakers, namely that we must not be diverted from the fight against climate change because of COVID. We need to continue with these key actions and commitments in Latin America and the Caribbean. I also want to underscore the fact that we have done well in terms of developing sub-regional policies. A lot has been done at that level to come forward with a shared region for a shared policy for the region in the context of the pandemic. Another thing that's quite clear is that Latin America and the Caribbean have huge potential given all the renewable resources that we have. And it's our responsibility, therefore, to make greater use of these resources. I think it was the Vice Minister of Honduras who made quite clear what our challenges are going to be with respect to fossil fuels and energy. So we have to offer the right incentives to move in the right direction. Because decarbonation is, of course, vital. I don't want to overlook the importance of natural gas either. It is a key factor in decarbonation. We should use it to achieve that goal. Should be part of our regional strategies. There are also opportunities in the area of integration. And I think we should take advantage of the situation to boost integration. Another important factor was the role of the private sector. There needs to be a better linkage between the public and private sectors. I'm thinking of what the Minister of Chile said. They've been very innovative in such partnership models. They have provided very interesting and attractive incentives. So we need to look at these mechanisms whereby we can include private investment in all our efforts.
Un abordaje desde el punto de vista de los reguladores, la necesidad de modernizar.
And of course, we heard how important regulators are. The whole regulatory setup is vital. In IEA-OLADE, we are very aware of that. And it's quite clear that we're going to have to adjust to this new situation. We need to develop the necessary resilience, learning from regional experience, and it's vital, therefore, we exchange experience and best practices. And last but not least, what we are left with is the need to empower consumers. They need to be included in all our commitments, not just with respect to COVID, but also the environment. So it's clear that one way or another, we have to develop regional initiatives, and I think the role of international agencies there is vital. Why couldn't we have a sectoral fund, for example, that could be used in the region? Maybe we need to sit down with the international cooperation agencies and come up with a mechanism of this type. That would be a major contribution to sustainable recovery, because we know that this is going to be a long-term process, at least 2 years. We also need to work more on inclusion to make sure that the pandemic does not worsen these gaps. And we need to have a shared agenda around those issues. So it's clear that there's a lot that everyone agrees on. That was quite clear in all the presentations. So what we now need to do is start to construct clear, specific strategies and roadmaps that are shared across the region. Obviously, the states will have a role, the private sector will have a role, academia and other stakeholders as well, in terms of providing the necessary expertise and knowledge that will drive innovation and development. So let me conclude by saying thank you all very much. I'd like to thank everybody at the IEA for organizing this event. I would also like to thank in particular the IDB that has always taken a great interest in the energy sector. The organization and coordination of this team has been fabulous. And basically, I want to urge you all to ensure that there is commitment by all the authorities in the region so that we can maintain this interaction and dialogue. And this requires the widest possible participation by all the stakeholders in this area. I would now like to give the floor to Dr. Fatih Birol of IEA to close this event. Thank you all very much. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you to everyone who was involved, to our moderators, and of course, above all, to Dr. Fatih Birol for moderating panel number 1 and organizing the whole event this afternoon and this evening. So have a nice day or a nice evening, depending on where you are. It's over to you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Alfonso, and thank you very much to you and all of your team for jointly putting together what we found was just a terrific session today. And thanks to our IDB colleagues as well. As you can tell, I am not Dr. Fatih Birol. You all heard from him in the opening and the chairing of the first session. I'm his deputy here at the IEA, and it's a particular privilege to be with you all, having been born in Ecuador and grew up part of my years in Chile and Brazil as well. So it's a pleasure to be with you all, and thank you to all of our excellent presenters, participants.
And viewers, we have over 4,000 viewers watching us as well, not only in the region, but also globally also. So thank you for all of you who've been paying attention as well. Let me just compliment, Alfonso, your terrific points as well with 4, and really to draw out some key themes that we took away from this excellent series of sessions here. First is the importance of really drawing out opportunities in a time of crisis. This is a time of crisis. This is a time of challenge, no doubt, for all countries around the world, including in Latin America. But it was very encouraging and I would say inspiring to hear a lot of commonality about drawing out some of those opportunities. We heard from Colombia, we heard from Chile and Costa Rica along these lines, but I suspect smart leadership, dynamic leadership around the region will be looking at those opportunities coming out of this crisis and challenge. Secondly is the importance of resilience. Resilience is important all the time. It's a word we use a lot here at the IEA, but I think it's one of those words and concepts that's increasingly important. And certainly the COVID crisis itself, but a lot of other dynamics, many of which are outside of our control, certainly if you're a government or society, and having resilience in your energy systems is incredibly important and something that we look forward to working with you all on. We heard certain technologies like hydrogen come up again and again that can be a critical part of this building resilience in a variety of our energy systems. So that's a second theme I just wanted to particularly draw attention to. Third piece, and we heard this in our last session in particular, the importance of an inclusive approach. And Alfonso, you put it very eloquently in your closing comments as well. We heard from the Prime Minister of Guyana, we heard from Ambassador Palma, we heard from others about the importance, the gender piece of this, and Alfonso, you referenced this as well, but other inclusiveness, incredibly important, again, in normal circumstances, but I think will be incredibly important as we come out of the economic recession over the next several year time period. So third point, inclusiveness and the real uniform support for that kind of approach. And then the fourth, and Alfonso, you mentioned this, but I'll just conclude on this point, is the importance of learning from each other. These are dynamic times. These are unprecedented times. I find myself using the word unprecedented over and over again because these are such challenging times in energy and throughout as well. And as countries are wrestling with the challenges, but also the opportunities coming from this crisis, we can learn from each other. And we completely share your sentiment, Alfonso, that OLADE, IEA, that's what we're here for. If we can share experiences, not only help share experiences within the region, but help share experiences, lessons learned from the region for the rest of the world or from the rest of the world to Latin America as well. There's an awful lot the rest of the world can frankly learn from the Latin American experience in different countries and societies within Latin America as well. So let me conclude there with a big thanks to OLADE, to all the organizers here from the IEA side, to Rebecca and Georg, Mariano, among others on the IEA side. Thanks to IDB for the partnership. Thanks again to everyone who participated and partnered. And let me just leave a message. Our executive director, Dr. Fatih Birol, mentioned this in his opening. We look forward to working even further with OLADE, with IDB, with the countries, with all of you going forward, and whatever we can do to be helpful to you in these challenging times, but times of opportunity as well, we very much look forward to it. So in the interest of time, let me leave it there. But again, a big thank you for what we found to be a terrific series of discussions today. Thank you very much. Signing off from Paris.